The radio crackled at 23:47 with three words that would shatter the silence of a frozen Idaho night. Send help now. Elena Volkov set down her coffee and listened. The emergency frequency she monitored every night, the one she was never supposed to have access to, erupted again with fragmented desperation. Any station, this is Falcon 6. We are compromised. Grid reference 7428. 2 wounded. Need immediate extraction. The voice belonged to a man trying very hard to sound calm while his world collapsed around him. Commander Ronan Thatcher. She had memorized his name 6 weeks ago when his team inserted into the region, back when her job was to provide intelligence support from a safe distance. That distance had just evaporated. Elena crossed the small room she called home in the refugee assistance compound. Bare concrete walls decorated with nothing but a calendar from the Ukrainian resettlement program. Her fingers found the loose tile beneath her cot. The tile that shouldn't be loose. The tile that concealed a space that shouldn't exist in a humanitarian worker's quarters. Inside lay a rifle case, a tactical vest, a handgun, ammunition, and a satellite phone that connected to exactly one number in Langley, Virginia. The voice on the radio grew more strained. Younger this time, Petty Officer Declan Hayes, the communications specialist. Hayes is hit, shoulder wound, bleeding controlled, but he needs evac. Cross is running low on ammunition. Vance is holding the eastern approach, but they're probing every 30 seconds. Whoever planned this knew exactly where we'd be. Elena opened the rifle case. The weapon inside was a thing of brutal elegance. Her father's M40A5, a precision instrument capable of reaching across impossible distances to deliver consequences. She had not fired it in 4 months. She had hoped she would never fire it again. Her satellite phone buzzed. James Walsh's voice came through before she could speak. I'm monitoring the same frequency. Extract assets are 90 minutes out at minimum, probably longer. They don't have 90 minutes, Elena said. I know. There was weight in those 2 words. The weight of a handler who understood what his operative was about to do and could not officially sanction it. The agency cannot authorize unilateral action. You understand what I'm saying? She understood perfectly. He was telling her that if she went alone. No backup, no support, no official existence. If she died out there, she would be nothing more than an unfortunate aid worker caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Elena began loading magazines with practiced efficiency, each round seated with a soft click that echoed in the small room like a countdown. How'd they get burned? She asked. Bad intelligence, Walsh said, and something in his voice made her pause. Someone fed them a target that didn't exist, led them straight into a prepared ambush. Prepared ambushes required preparation. They required knowledge of the team's insertion point, their timeline, their route. They required a source with access to American operational planning. Who's running the opposition? Silence on the line. Then Walsh spoke a name that made Elena's blood cool by several degrees. Victor Razin, former Spetsnaz, lost his brother in a strike 2 years ago. He's been hunting American assets in the region ever since. Smart, patient, and extremely motivated. Elena resumed loading. She knew Razin's file. She had built Razin's file. She had provided the intelligence that led to the drone strike that killed his brother Mikhail. County sheriff, FBI informant, good man trying to stop his own brother's militia from escalating into domestic terrorism. Collateral damage, that was what the report had called him. An acceptable loss in pursuit of a larger objective. Mikhail Razin had 3 children. His wife Sarah taught elementary school. He coached Little League on weekends. Elena had read all of this after the strike. After it was too late to take back the intelligence that put crosshairs on a meeting she had only partially understood. She pulled on the tactical vest and checked her sidearm. The woman who would leave this compound looked nothing like the humanitarian worker who had arrived 4 months ago. That woman had soft eyes and an easy smile. This woman had the flat gaze of someone who had made a decision that could not be unmade. Outside, the night pressed close. No moon, no artificial light for miles. Perfect conditions for someone who had learned to navigate by stars and memory. 8 miles, 40 hostile fighters. 4 men she had never met, but whose voices she would carry with her into the dark. The math was impossible. The odds were laughable. Elena Volkov stepped off the compound and began to run. Behind her, the radio crackled one more time. Declan Hayes's voice, barely a whisper. "If anyone can hear this, please, we're out of options." She could not answer, not yet. Not until she was close enough to answer with something other than words. The wilderness swallowed her whole, and somewhere in the distance, a man named Victor Razin had no idea that the ghost he had been hunting for 2 years was finally coming for him. The first kilometer was the most dangerous. Elena knew the militia maintained observation posts around the refugee compound. Young men with rifles who spent most nights smoking cigarettes and complaining about the cold. She had smiled at them dozens of times during daylight supply runs, played the role of the harmless aid worker who brought medicine and hope to people fleeing war. Tonight she gave them a wide berth, cutting through a frozen creek bed that wound through stands of lodgepole pine. The water had formed a skin of ice that cracked beneath her boots, with sounds like breaking bones. Each step had to be measured, controlled, placed with the precision her father had drilled into her before she understood why precision mattered. The memory came unbidden. She was 10 years old, standing in snow on a Montana ranch, while her father adjusted the scope on a rifle that seemed impossibly large in her small hands. "Slow is smooth, Yelenushka," he had said, using the Russian diminutive that made her name sound like a song. "Smooth is fast. Rush and you miss. Miss, and someone dies who shouldn't." Dmitry Volkov had defected from Soviet Special Forces 3 years before she was born, walked away from everything he knew for a chance to raise his daughter in a country that would not send her to die in someone else's war. He had traded his service record for a small ranch in the Bitterroot Valley in the hope that his skills would die with him. Instead, he had passed them on. Every weekend, every summer, every moment he could steal from ranch work, he had taught her. Not because he wanted to create a weapon, because he understood that the world was full of wolves, and his little wolf needed to know how to survive them. Elena cleared the creek bed and picked up her pace. The terrain here was broken and treacherous. Granite outcroppings that could turn an ankle in darkness. Deadfall that could snap beneath weight and echo across the valley like a gunshot. She moved through it like water finding cracks in stone, each footfall placed with absolute certainty. Her father's voice lived in her head during moments like this, a ghost that guided her through darkness. "You have a gift," he used to say, watching her group shots at distances that made neighboring ranchers nervous. A gift is also a responsibility. You must decide what you will use it for. She had decided at 18. 1 week after they buried him on the ranch. 1 week after the heart attack that the doctor said had simply stopped his heart, as if the organ had grown tired of carrying all the secrets it held. The CIA recruitment office in Missoula had been expecting her. Her father's defection file had flagged her as a person of interest since birth. They had been waiting for her to age into usefulness. The funeral had simply accelerated the timeline. Elena pushed the memory away and focused on the present. 3 kilometers covered, 5 to go. Then the real work would begin. The radio in her ear crackled softly with SEAL Team communications. They had switched to a secondary frequency, standard protocol, when they suspected compromise. Commander Thatcher was speaking in the clipped tones of a man managing a crisis that had no good solutions. "We hold until dawn. If no support by sunrise, we attempt breakout to the south." Senior Chief Garrett Vance responded with a voice like gravel being crushed. 48 years old, 3 deployments, 2 ex-wives, and a reputation for being the hardest man in any room he entered. "Breakout through 40 fighters with 2 wounded? That's suicide, Commander." "I'm open to alternatives, Senior Chief." Silence. Because there were no alternatives, they all knew it. Elena ran faster. Her breath formed clouds in the freezing air that hung for a moment before dissolving into darkness. The elevation was increasing now, the terrain tilting upward toward the ridgeline that separated the valley from the wilderness beyond. 2,000 feet of vertical climb waited ahead. In daylight, with proper equipment, it was a 4-hour ascent. Tonight, she would have to do it in 90 minutes. The satellite phone buzzed against her hip. Walsh again. Satellite imagery shows significant force concentration around the target compound. I count at least 42 fighters in fixed positions, with another 12 in mobile reserve. They have technical vehicles with mounted weapons covering the main approaches. She processed the information without breaking stride. What about the Western Ridge? Minimal coverage. Rosine seems to believe no one would approach from that direction. It's a 4-hour climb in daylight. Then it's a 2-hour climb tonight. Walsh was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his handler's mask had slipped just slightly, revealing the man beneath. Elena, even if you reach a firing position, you're one person against 60. The math doesn't work. She thought about Declan Hayes' voice on the radio, the desperation that crept in around the edges of his professional calm. She thought about Petty Officer Brennan Cross, the team medic, trying to keep his wounded teammate alive with supplies that were running out. She thought about Senior Chief Vance holding a perimeter that could not be held, and Commander Thatcher making impossible decisions in an impossible situation. She thought about 8 Marines whose names she carried like stones in her chest, men who had died 2 years ago in Afghanistan because she followed protocol instead of instinct, waited for confirmation that came too late. Men whose families received folded flags because she had been too cautious, too careful. The math never works, she said. We do it anyway. Walsh was silent for a long moment. Then, I'll keep the channel open. If you need extraction coordinates for yourself, say the word cardinal, and I'll have assets redirect to your position. She would not use that word. They both knew it. The ridgeline appeared before her like a wall of darkness, blocking out the stars. 2 hours of climbing lay ahead, and at the top waited an impossible situation. 60 fighters, 4 SEALs, 1 woman with a rifle and a set of skills she had spent her whole life pretending she did not possess. Elena began to climb. The rock was cold beneath her fingers, sharp in places where winter had fractured it into edges that could slice through tactical gloves. She found handholds by touch and memory, pulling herself upward inch by inch. Below her, the valley floor fell away into absolute darkness. A fall from this height would not kill instantly. It would be a long, tumbling descent through rock and ice, bones breaking one at a time until consciousness finally fled. Elena did not look down. Her father had taught her that looking down was how climbers died. The only direction that mattered was up. Halfway to the summit, her radio captured a fragment of SEAL communication. Commander Thatcher's Boston accent flattened by exhaustion. Vance, what's our ammunition status? 3 magazines for the rifles, maybe 40 rounds for sidearms. If they push hard, we've got 20 minutes of effective resistance. After that, we're throwing rocks. A new voice cut in, young, trying to hide fear beneath bravado. Brennan Cross, 26 years old, on his second deployment. Hayes' pulse is getting weaker. I've got the bleeding stopped, but he needs real medical attention. Hours, not days. Elena climbed faster. Her shoulders burned and her fingers ached, but her pace never faltered. Somewhere above, 4 men were counting the minutes until their ammunition ran dry. She would reach them before those minutes expired, or she would die trying. The memory surfaced despite her efforts to push it away. Afghanistan, 2 years ago. She had been tracking a Taliban cell responsible for coordinating attacks on American supply convoys. 3 months of patient intelligence gathering had finally yielded a target. A meeting of cell leaders in a compound outside Kandahar. She had sent the intelligence up the chain. Her handler at the time, a man named Robert Westcott, had delayed action pending additional confirmation. The meeting had dispersed before the strike could be authorized. 3 weeks later, that same Taliban cell executed an ambush that killed 8 Marines on a routine patrol. Elena had attended none of the funerals. She had not earned the right. Instead, she had requested reassignment to low-risk intelligence monitoring, refugee assistance in the Idaho wilderness, far from combat operations, far from decisions that cost lives. But the decisions had found her anyway, because 6 months into her quiet assignment, her intelligence on Victor Razin's militia compound had led to a drone strike that killed 12 people, including Mikhail Razin, a county sheriff, an FBI informant, a father of 3 who was trying to stop his own brother from escalating into domestic terrorism. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong intelligence. The same pattern that had killed 8 Marines. Elena pulled herself over a particularly difficult section and paused to control her breathing. Her father's voice echoed in memory. "A man must know what he will die for, little wolf. More importantly, he must know what he will not kill for. When you know those 2 things, you know who you are." She had been 12 years old, sitting on the porch watching him clean the rifle that now rested against her back. She had not understood then. She understood now. The summit appeared through the darkness like a promise. One final pull, one last effort, and she would have the high ground. Elena forced her burning muscles to comply and hauled herself over the edge. The valley spread below her like a map drawn in shadow and starlight. In the center, the old copper mine facility where the SEALs were trapped. She could see the muzzle flashes of suppressing fire, could see the technical vehicles arranged in a careful perimeter, could see the systematic way Razin had positioned his forces to ensure nothing escaped. And there, in the middle of that carefully constructed kill box, 4 men waited for help that official channels said could not arrive in time. Elena unslung her rifle and began her assessment. Range to primary targets, 800 meters average. Wind, 12 miles per hour from the northwest, gusting to 15. Temperature, -10 Fahrenheit, which would affect bullet trajectory at distance. Elevation advantage, significant, but it also meant steeper angles that required compensation. She counted positions. 42 fighters in fixed locations, 12 mobile, 6 technical vehicles with mounted machine guns, 1 command post in the old mine office building, 400 meters northeast of the trapped SEALs. Clear sight lines to approximately 60% of hostile forces. Not good odds, but better than the SEALs had right now. Elena settled into her firing position and chambered around. The familiar weight of the rifle, the scope's cool kiss against her cheek, the way her breathing automatically slowed and deepened. All of it felt like coming home to a place she had tried to leave behind. Her finger rested on the trigger. Light pressure, not enough to fire, just enough to feel the connection between intent and action. In a few moments, she would announce her presence to 60 men who wanted her dead. She would start a fight she could not win through conventional means. She would commit herself to a course of action that would end in extraction or death, with very little room for anything in between. But first, she needed to let them know she was here. Elena keyed her radio to the SEAL team's frequency. "Falcon 6, this is an Allied asset. Do you copy?" Silence. Then Commander Thatcher's voice, sharp with surprise and suspicion. "Allied asset, identify yourself and your position." "You can call me Wraith. I'm on the western ridge, approximately 800 meters from your location. I have clear sight lines to 60% of hostile forces. In approximately 3 minutes, I'm going to start reducing their numbers. When you hear the first shot, cease all fire and take hard cover. Do not engage. Do not draw attention. Let them focus on finding me. The longer they look in my direction, the longer you stay alive." Another pause. She could imagine the looks being exchanged in that battered compound. The desperate hope warring with tactical skepticism. Senior Chief Vance's voice cut through, pure gravel and doubt. "Unknown asset, this is Senior Chief Vance. We have zero visibility on your position, zero confirmation of your capabilities. And you're telling us to cease fire and trust that one person can engage 60 hostiles? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Senior Chief. That's insane. Probably, but it's also the only option you have. So I need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly. She heard muttered conversation on their end. Then Commander Thatcher spoke with the voice of a man who had run out of alternatives and was choosing to believe in the least impossible option. Wraith, we're listening. What do you need from us? In 2 minutes, I'll take my first shot. When you hear it, go completely dark. No fire, no movement, no sound. Make them think you're conserving strength for a last stand. Let them focus on the ridge. I'll do the rest. And if they overrun us while we're dark, they won't, because I'm going to kill anyone who tries. She could hear the uncertainty in the silence that followed. These men did not know her, had no reason to trust a voice on the radio claiming to be their salvation. But desperation made people willing to believe in miracles. And right now she was the closest thing to a miracle they had. Wraith, Thatcher said quietly, who sent you? Nobody sent me, Commander. I heard your call when no one else could answer. That's all you need to know. She ended the transmission and returned her focus to the scope. Time to choose her first target. Not the closest fighter or the most exposed. The first shot needed to send a message, needed to create maximum confusion and psychological impact. Her crosshairs settled on a technical vehicle 300 meters from the SEAL position. A fighter stood in the truck bed behind a mounted machine gun, directing fire toward the compound. Squad leader, based on the way other fighters looked to him for instruction. Kill him and the coordination would collapse into chaos. Range, 780 meters. Wind, 13 miles per hour, quartering from the left. Elevation drop, approximately 5 degrees. She calculated the corrections automatically, muscle memory and training combining with instinct that her father had spent years cultivating. Elena took a breath, released half of it, found the space between heartbeats where the world went still and quiet. Then she squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with familiar authority. The suppressor reduced the report to a sharp crack that echoed across the valley like breaking ice. 0.8 of a second later, 780 meters away, the fighter behind the machine gun crumpled and fell from the truck bed. For a long moment, nothing happened. The militia fighters froze, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their leader, their coordinator, simply gone. No warning, no visible threat, just sudden absence where a man had been standing. Then chaos erupted. Fighters scattered in every direction, seeking cover that would protect them from a threat they could not locate. Machine guns opened fire toward the ridge, spraying rounds wildly across rock faces in empty air. The discipline that Razin had instilled in his militia evaporated in seconds, replaced by the primal instinct to avoid being next. In the compound below, the SEAL team went dark exactly as instructed. All fire ceased. The sudden silence from their position made it seem as if they had been wiped out, no longer a threat worth focusing on. Elena chambered another round and found her second target, a fighter crouched behind a low wall 400 meters from the SEALs, directing others toward better positions. He thought the wall made him invisible. He was wrong. She exhaled and fired. The fighter dropped. Third target, a man sprinting between cover positions, silhouetted against the dark sky. She led him by 2 feet and squeezed. He fell mid-stride and did not get up. The militia's return fire was increasing in volume, but decreasing in accuracy. They were shooting at muzzle flash and shadows, wasting ammunition on ghosts. Elena had chosen her position well, a natural depression in the ridgeline that concealed her from 3 directions, while giving her overlapping sightlines on the valley floor. Fourth target, another squad leader attempting to restore order, shouting instructions and physically grabbing fighters to reposition them. His initiative made him dangerous. She ended that danger with a shot that dropped him beside the very men he was trying to rally. The pattern was established now. Every 30 seconds, another fighter fell. No warning, no pattern to predict, just methodical elimination that turned living men into casualties. The psychological impact was devastating. In firefights, soldiers could orient toward the threat, suppress it, defeat it. But against an invisible enemy who struck without warning from an unknown location, there was only fear. Commander Thatcher's voice whispered in her earpiece, "Wraith, that's 4 down in 90 seconds. Who the hell are you?" "Someone who learned to shoot from the best teacher in the world," she replied, already acquiring her 5th target. "Stay dark, Commander. I'm just getting started." But even as she spoke, Elena caught a glint of light on the eastern ridge, a reflection that appeared for a fraction of a second before disappearing. Scope glass. Professional hide construction. The angle's all wrong for ambient light. Counter sniper. Her blood went cold. They had brought him before the SEALs even arrived, before the ambush was sprung, which meant Rosin had not just anticipated that someone might try to help the trapped Americans. He had anticipated that Elena specifically would come, had planned for it, had positioned his best gun to hunt her while his militia kept the SEALs pinned. This was not just an ambush. This was a trap within a trap, and she had walked straight into it. Elena rolled left, abandoning her carefully chosen position, a heartbeat before a bullet cracked through the space her head had occupied. Rock fragments exploded across her face, one shard cutting a line across her left cheek that immediately welled with blood. She pressed flat against the stone and controlled her breathing. Professional counter-sniper. That meant Russian training, probably Spetsnaz or GRU. He had tracked her muzzle flash, calculated her position, and put a round within inches of her skull. If she had been slower, if her instinct had been even a fraction of a second delayed, she would already be dead. "Wraith, we heard that shot." Thatcher's voice carried tension that had not been there before. "Different signature than yours. What's happening up there?" Elena touched her bleeding cheek and assessed. "Superficial, painful but not debilitating. I have a counter-sniper on my position. Professional. He nearly had me. I'm relocating." Silence on the channel. Then Senior Chief Vance's voice, stripped of its earlier skepticism. "One shooter against 60, and now someone's hunting you specifically. This just keeps getting better." She ignored the comment and began crawling backward along the ridge, keeping the stone between herself and the enemy sniper's last known position. Every movement had to be calculated, every handhold chosen to minimize sound and visual signature. The man hunting her would be relocating as well, trying to anticipate her next firing position. The game had changed. She was no longer simply eliminating targets. She was fighting a parallel war against someone whose skills might match her own. In the valley below, she had killed 5 fighters in 2 minutes. 55 remained. That was not enough. 5 would not create an extraction corridor. 5 would not save 4 men who were counting down the minutes until their ammunition ran dry. But the counter-sniper had forced her to abandon her perfect position, had degraded her effectiveness, had transformed this from a shooting exercise into a deadly chess match where one wrong move would end with a bullet through her skull. Elena found a secondary position 30 meters along the ridge. Not as good as the first, but it offered new sight lines and would require the enemy sniper to reposition to acquire her. She settled in and scanned the valley, looking for targets that would maximize disruption. Her radio crackled. Commander Thatcher again. "Wraith, we need to know. How did you find us? This was a black operation. Only 6 people knew our insertion point." The question hung in the air like smoke. Elena knew what he was really asking. How had she known where to find them? How had she arrived so quickly? How had she been in position to monitor their emergency frequency? And beneath those questions lay a darker one. Was she the reason they were in this kill box to begin with? She found a target, a fighter attempting to reposition between 2 buildings, and fired. The man dropped, 6 down. "Commander," she said, chambering another round, "I think I'm one of the reasons you're in this mess." The silence that followed, was absolute. Even the sound of distant gunfire seemed to pause, as if the entire valley was holding its breath. "Explain," Thatcher said, and his voice had gone very cold. Elena found her next target and fired. 7 down. Then she told them the truth they deserved to hear. "I've been monitoring Victor Razin's compound for 4 months, gathering intelligence on his militia operations. 2 years ago, that intelligence led to a drone strike on what we believed was an arms trafficking meeting. 12 targets eliminated, including Razin's younger brother, Mikhail." She paused, steadied her breathing, and continued. "What I didn't know until after the strike was that Mikhail Razin was a county sheriff, an FBI informant. He was trying to stop his own brother, trying to prevent the militia from escalating into domestic terrorism. He was a good man in the wrong room at the wrong time. Collateral damage." Another pause, another shot. 8 down. "Victor has been hunting the person responsible for his brother's death for 2 years. The ghost, his people call me. Someone who moves through the shadows gathering secrets. He knew I was operating in this region. This operation, your mission, it was designed to draw me out. Bad intelligence fed through channels he knew I monitored. A trap baited with American lives." The silence stretched. Elena could imagine the looks being exchanged in that compound. The anger, the betrayal, the sick realization that they were bait in a trap meant for someone else. Senior Chief Vance spoke first, and his voice carried an edge that could cut steel. "So we're dying because of you, because you killed the wrong man, and now his brother wants revenge." "Yes." One word. No excuses, no justifications, just acceptance of a truth that could not be softened. Commander Thatcher's response was quieter, more measured, but no less intense. "Wraith, Elena, whatever your name is, why are you telling us this now?" "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because I'm going to make sure you don't die for my mistakes." She fired again. 9 down. 41 fighters remained in the valley, and somewhere on the eastern ridge, a patient man with a rifle was waiting for her to make the mistake that would end her. "I failed people before," Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 years ago in Afghanistan, 8 Marines died because I followed protocol instead of instinct. I waited for confirmation that came too late. I won't make that mistake again. Not with you. Not tonight." The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Brennan Cross spoke up, his young voice carrying something that might have been understanding. "Wraith, everyone who pulls a trigger carries ghosts. The question is what you do about them." "I'm here," Elena said simply. "That's what I'm doing about them." Commander Thatcher cleared his throat, and when he spoke again, the coldness had been replaced by something else. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps acceptance. "Wraith, what's done is done. Right now you're the only chance we have. Can you get us out of this?" Elena chambered another round and found her next target. A fighter manning one of the technical vehicles, his body momentarily exposed as he leaned forward to adjust the mounted gun. She squeezed the trigger. 10 down. "Yes, Commander, I can get you out, but I need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly." "We're listening." "Good, because in about 60 seconds, Victor Razin is going to realize that losing men one at a time is not a sustainable strategy. He's going to change tactics, probably assault your position with everything he has, while his counter-sniper keeps me pinned. When that happens, I need you ready to move fast." Before Thatcher could respond, a new sound echoed across the valley. A loudspeaker crackling to life with a voice that was cultured, educated, and utterly certain of its own authority. "I know you're up there." The words were English, precise and clear, carrying the faint trace of advanced education and barely controlled rage. "I've been wondering when you would finally show yourself. The American ghost. The woman who moves through shadows and leaves bodies in her wake." Elena's blood turned cold. She knew that voice. Had listened to hours of intercepted communications while building her intelligence file. Victor Razin, speaking directly to her across 800 meters, of frozen Idaho wilderness. My men have been hunting you for 2 years, Razin continued, his voice amplified to fill the valley. Every time we get close, you disappear. Every time we set a trap, you slip through. I began to wonder if you were real at all, or simply a story American intelligence invented to frighten us. In the compound below, the SEAL team had gone completely silent. Elena could imagine their confusion, their growing understanding that the woman trying to save them was not some random operative, but someone far more complicated. But you made a mistake coming here tonight, Ghost. You made it personal. Because I know something about you now. I know why you came. Elena felt the words before he spoke them, felt the shape of the revelation forming in the air like a storm about to break. 2 years ago, a drone strike killed 17 men at a meeting outside Coeur d'Alene. Important men, leaders, planners. My brother Mikhail was among them. Razin's voice grew harder, colder, each word chipped from ice. He was not a fighter. He was a sheriff, a father of 3 children who will never see him again. And the intelligence that led to that strike, the information that told your military exactly where to find us, came from you. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. I did not know your name then, Razin said. I did not know your face, but I knew you existed. I knew someone had provided that intelligence, someone with access to sources deep within our networks. I have spent 2 years hunting for you, building traps, waiting. His voice dropped to something that was almost gentle, almost sad. And now here you are, alone on a mountain, trying to save 4 men who mean nothing in the larger war. Tell me, Ghost, was my brother's life worth this? Was killing a good man worth the guilt that brought you here tonight? Elena closed her eyes. Every word was true, every accusation justified. Mikhail Razin had been in that meeting, yes, but he had been there wearing a wire, gathering evidence, trying to stop his brother from crossing lines that could not be uncrossed. She had known he was law enforcement, had flagged him in her intelligence report as potential collateral, had recommended additional verification before any strike was authorized. But the strike had gone forward anyway. 12 targets eliminated. 1 county sheriff dead because somebody higher up the chain had decided that acceptable losses were acceptable. Elena opened her eyes and found another target. Fired. 11 down. Commander Thatcher, she said quietly, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. We're listening, Wraith. In approximately 90 seconds, Razin is going to make you an offer. He's going to tell you that if I surrender myself, he'll let you go. He'll promise extraction, medical attention, safe passage. And he's lying. The moment I show myself, he'll kill me and then kill all of you. This is theater, Commander. He's trying to make me feel responsible for your deaths, trying to break me psychologically before he breaks me physically. Senior Chief Vance cut in, his voice thoughtful despite the situation. But you already feel responsible. That's why you're here. That's why you crossed 8 miles of hostile territory and climbed a mountain in the dark. Yes. So what are you going to do? Elena chambered another round and settled her breathing. The counter-sniper was still out there, still hunting, still waiting for her to make a mistake. 40 fighters remained in the valley. The SEALs had maybe 30 minutes of ammunition left. Dawn was 4 hours away, and reinforcements were not coming. I'm going to do what I came here to do, Senior Chief. I'm going to kill every fighter between you and extraction. And I'm not going to stop until you're safe or I'm dead. Those are the only 2 options. She fired. 12 down. Razin's loudspeaker crackled again. You have 5 minutes to decide, Ghost. After that, I will assume you have chosen to continue fighting, and I will instruct my men to advance on the American position with everything we have. Your friends will die badly. It will be your fault, just like my brother's death was your fault. 5 minutes. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Silence returned to the valley, broken only by the wind and the distant sound of frightened men checking their weapons and praying to gods who had stopped listening hours ago. Elena looked at the scope, at the valley spread below her like a killing floor, at 4 dots of heat signature that represented men she had never met but would die to protect. She thought about Mikhail Razin, a teacher, a father, a man who tried to do right and died for it. Then she keyed her radio one last time. "Commander Thatcher, I'm going to tell you something my father taught me when I was 12 years old. He said that missing a shot is a lesson, but taking the wrong shot is a tragedy. Always be sure." "What does that mean, Wraith?" "It means I wasn't sure about Mikhail Razin. I took the shot anyway. 12 people died, including a good man who didn't deserve it. I'm done taking shots I'm not sure about." She paused, let the words settle, then continued. "I'm sure about you. I'm sure about Senior Chief Vance, about Declan Hayes, about Brennan Cross. I'm sure that you deserve to go home to your families. So I'm taking this shot, Commander, and I'm not missing." 13 seconds remained before Razin's ultimatum expired. 13 seconds before 40 men would surge toward the compound and end 4 American lives in a storm of fire and fury. Elena Volkov steadied her breathing, found her next target, and continued the mathematics of survival. 1 shot at a time, 1 life saved for every life taken, until the numbers balanced or she ran out of bullets, whichever came first. The first assault wave came at dawn like a breaking storm. 30 men spread across the valley floor in a loose formation designed to minimize casualties from a single shooter. Smart tactics against conventional snipers. Against Elena Volkov, it simply meant more targets. She fired 4 times in 6 seconds. 4 bodies dropped. The formation wavered as survivors scrambled for cover, their momentum shattered before they had crossed half the distance to the compound. "Trident 1, hold fire," Elena transmitted, keeping her voice level despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Let them regroup. They'll try again in 60 seconds with a different approach." Commander Thatcher acknowledged. In the brief pause, Elena scanned for the counter-sniper. Alexei Korsakov. She had learned his name from intercepted militia communications. Former Russian Special Forces, legendary patience, 47 confirmed kills across 3 conflicts. The kind of man who never rushed, never panicked, simply waited until his target made a fatal mistake. He was still out there, still hunting. She could feel his presence like a weight pressing against her awareness. The second wave came differently. Fighters using technical vehicles as mobile cover, the mounted guns spraying suppressive fire toward the ridge, while infantry advanced in the vehicle's shadows. Better tactics, more dangerous. Elena ignored the bullets sparking off rocks around her position and focused on the drivers. First Technical lost control at 400 meters and veered into a ditch. Its driver slumped over the wheel. Second Technical made it another 100 meters before she put a round through the gunner and then the man who tried to take his place. But the third vehicle had angled away from her primary sightlines, using terrain features she had not fully accounted for. By the time she acquired it, the fighters it carried were already within grenade range of the compound. "Trident 1, you have 6 hostiles approaching your northwestern corner. I don't have a clean shot." Thatcher's response was drowned out by close-quarters gunfire. The SEALs engaging, their disciplined bursts cutting through the chaos. She heard Senior Chief Vance bellowing commands, heard Brennan Cross calling out targets with the high-tension clarity of a young man discovering what he was made of under fire. Then she heard something that made her stomach clench. "Hayes is hit again!" Cross's voice cracked with panic. "He's not responding. I need to get him to better cover." "Negative," Thatcher was shouting now. "Cross, stay in position. You move and you expose the whole team." "Sir, he's dying." Elena made a decision that violated every principle of sound tactical judgment. She broke cover and sprinted along the ridgeline, abandoning her carefully chosen position for one that gave her angle on the northwestern approach. The counter sniper would see her. She was counting on it. The gamble paid off in blood. She dropped 2 of the 6 fighters threatening the compound before Alexi's bullet tore through her left forearm. The impact spun her sideways and she hit the ground hard, her rifle clattering against stone. Pain exploded from shoulder to fingertips, white hot and electric, every nerve ending screaming protest. She bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood and forced herself to assess the damage. Through and through wound, missing the bone by perhaps 2 inches. The arm was functional but compromised. Her accuracy would suffer. Her ability to maintain stable firing positions would degrade with each passing minute. "Wraith, report!" Thatcher's voice was urgent. "We heard that shot. Are you hit?" She retrieved her rifle with her right hand and pressed her back against a boulder, breathing through the pain. Flesh wound, still operational. A lie, but a necessary one. The SEALs needed to believe she was invincible. They needed hope more than they needed truth. The remaining 4 fighters near the compound had gone to ground, pinned between the SEAL defensive fire and fear of the sniper who had already killed half their assault team. Stalemate. Temporary. Razin would not accept a stalemate for long. Elena used the precious seconds to improvise a bandage from torn fabric, wrapping the wound tight enough to slow the bleeding, but not so tight it would cost her the use of her hand. The pain was information, using for understanding limits, but irrelevant to the task at hand. "Wraith," a new voice on the radio. "Brennan Cross, steadier now. Hayes is stable for the moment. Pulse is weak, but he's hanging on." "How old are you, Cross?" Pause. Confusion at the question. 26. Why? "Because I need you to do something for me, and I need to know you're old enough to understand why it matters." Another pause, then quieter. "What do you need?" "When I create the extraction corridor, you're going to be responsible for getting Hayes out. Thatcher and Vance will provide cover, but you'll be carrying him. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am, I can do it." "Good. When I tell you to move, you move. You don't stop. You don't look back. You get him to the rally point and you follow it north until you reach extraction. Understood?" "Understood." Cross's voice carried a new weight. The weight of a man who had just been given a mission that mattered more than his own survival. "Wraith, I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but when this is over, I'm going to find out. And I'm going to make sure people know what you did here." Elena felt something crack in her chest, something she had kept frozen since Afghanistan. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Cross. Focus on surviving the next hour." She ended the transmission and turned her attention back to the valley. Her arm throbbed with each heartbeat, blood seeping through the improvised bandage and dripping down her fingers. The counter sniper was repositioning, preparing for another shot. Razin's reserve forces were forming up near the command post. 29 fighters remained in the valley. 4 men were dying in a compound 800 meters away. And somewhere in her handler's satellite imagery, a convoy was approaching with reinforcements that would turn impossible odds into certain death. Her satellite phone buzzed. Walsh's voice came through tight with controlled urgency. "Elena, I have updated imagery. There's a convoy approaching from the east. 3 vehicles, approximately 20 additional fighters. ETA 35 minutes. She had known reinforcements were coming, part of Razin's trap. But hearing the confirmation, hearing the timeline collapse from abstract threat to concrete deadline, made the mathematics brutally clear. "What about our extraction assets?" she asked. "Still 40 minutes out, minimum. Maybe 35 if they push hard." The numbers did not work. They had never worked, but now they were catastrophically worse. "Marcus," she said quietly, using his first name for perhaps the 3rd time in their professional relationship. "There's something you need to know. Satellite just tagged someone in that convoy. Facial recognition." Elena's grip tightened on the phone. "Who?" "Dmitry Volkov." The world tilted, not from blood loss, from the impossibility of what Walsh had just said. "That's not possible. My father's dead. 8 years." Elena, I'm looking at the image right now. It's him. Older, gray beard, but it's definitely him. He's in the lead vehicle with Razin's reinforcements. Her father, the man who had taught her everything, the man whose funeral she had attended, the man whose death had driven her to join the agency in the first place, alive and coming to kill her. Does he know? Elena asked, her voice hollow. Does he know the ghost is me? We don't think so. He was hired as a contractor 6 months ago. Former Spetsnaz expertise. Razin probably told him he was hunting a CIA operative, nothing more. Elena closed her eyes. Her father was alive, had faked his death, had spent 8 years as a military contractor while she built a career on the foundation of his supposed sacrifice. And now he was 35 minutes away from helping Victor Razin kill his own daughter without knowing it. Elena, are you there? I'm here. What do you want to do? She opened her eyes and found her next target, chambered around despite the pain in her arm. I'm going to finish what I started. I'm going to save these 4 men, and then I'm going to have a very long conversation with my father. Elena, 35 minutes, Marcus. Keep the channel open. She ended the call before he could argue. Below, movement near the command post caught her attention. Razin was reorganizing his forces, pulling fighters back from exposed positions and consolidating them for what would clearly be a final coordinated assault. He knew about the reinforcements. He knew about Dmitri. He was simply waiting, letting the clock run down, letting Elena exhaust herself while the real killing blow approached from the east. She keyed her radio to the SEAL frequency. Trident 1, we have a problem. Thatcher responded immediately. We saw the dust trails to the east. More company coming. 20 additional fighters, 35 minutes out. She paused. And someone else. Someone from my past. Silence. She could imagine the calculations happening in that compound. Senior Chief Vance spoke, and his voice carried something she had not heard before. Understanding, perhaps. Acceptance. Wraith, it's been an honor. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. Nothing's happening next except extraction, she said firmly. I have a plan. Vance laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement despite everything. Of course you do. What do you need from us? Everything you have left. When I give the signal, I need maximum fire on the southern positions. Every round, every grenade, everything. Make them think you're attempting a breakout to the south. And while they're focused on us, I'm going to kill the 29 fighters between you and the rally point. Then I'm going to deal with the counter-sniper. Then we're going to walk out of this valley before those reinforcements arrive. More silence. Then Cross's voice, younger but no less determined. Wraith, that's insane. Probably, she admitted, but it's also the only option we have. She shifted position, ignoring the fire in her wounded arm, and began identifying targets in a new pattern. The key was speed. She needed to create chaos faster than Razin could respond to it, faster than Alexei could track her movements. She needed to become what her father had always said she could be, a force of nature, unstoppable, inevitable. 35 minutes, 29 targets, 1 chance. And at the end of it all, a reunion with a dead man. Trident 1, she said. On my mark. She found her first target, a fighter crouched behind a low wall who believed concrete made him invisible. Her crosshairs settled on the 3 inches of shoulder and head visible above the barrier. Elena thought about her father, about the journal she believed contained his final thoughts, about 8 years of grief that had been built on a lie. She thought about Mikhail Razin and 8 Marines and all the wrong shots that haunted her sleep. None of them had ever seen what she could do when she stopped pretending. Mark, she said and pulled the trigger. The valley erupted into chaos. Razin watched from the command post window as his carefully arranged positions began to collapse. Fighters dropping without warning, one after another, killed by shots that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The Americans were firing south as expected, But the real damage was coming from the ridge, from a shooter who was no longer content to wait and react. She was hunting now, actively hunting, and his men were dying faster than he could issue orders. "Find her!" he screamed into his radio. "Alexei, find her and kill her now!" But the counter-sniper did not respond. And somewhere on the western ridge, a ghost was turning into an angel of death. Elena moved and fired, moved and fired. Each shot a calculation completed in fractions of a second. Wind and distance and target movement processed by instincts her father had spent years cultivating. She had abandoned every principle of concealment in favor of pure aggression, trading safety for speed, accepting wounds as the price of saving lives. Shot 14. Fighter repositioning between vehicles. Down. Shot 15. Militia lieutenant rallying his squad. Down. Shot 16. Technical gunner bringing his weapon to bear. Down. The fighters in the valley had stopped trying to advance. They were scrambling for cover, firing blindly at the ridge, dying before they understood what was killing them. Discipline collapsed under the weight of fear. Training evaporated in the face of an enemy who struck without warning and showed no mercy. Her wounded arm screamed with every movement. Blood soaked through the bandage and dripped from her fingers, leaving a trail of crimson on gray stone. She ignored it. Pain was simply information, useful for understanding damage but irrelevant to the mission. Shot 17. Fighter attempting to flank the SEAL position. Down. Shot 18. Spotter calling out her location. Down. Trident 1, she transmitted between shots. Begin movement to the rally point. Northern approach. Go now. Thatcher acknowledged, and she heard the sounds of the SEALs breaking cover. Cross's labored breathing as he carried Hayes's weight. Vance providing rear security, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. Thatcher coordinating movement with the calm efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times, but never under circumstances quite this desperate. She shifted her scope to cover their movement and found 3 fighters attempting to intercept. 3 shots, 3 bodies. The SEALs pushed forward through the gap she had created. Shot 21, fighter taking aim at Cross's exposed back. Down. A bullet cracked past her head, close enough to feel displaced air. Alexei. He had been waiting, letting her commit to the aggressive posture, knowing she would eventually present a target he could hit. She rolled left and came up scanning for his position. There, a glint of scope glass, a shape that did not belong to the rocks. 600 meters, eastern ridge, elevated high that gave him clear sightlines on her most likely firing positions. But she was not in a likely firing point anymore. She was exposed, wounded, operating on adrenaline and something deeper than training. She was operating on fury. Their scopes found each other at the same moment. 2 shooters separated by 600 meters of empty air, each knowing that the next second would determine who lived and who died. She saw his eye behind the glass, calm, patient, ready. She fired first. The bullet took Alexei through the right shoulder, spinning him backward and sending his own shot wide into empty air. Not a kill, but enough. Enough to buy time. Enough to remove him from the equation while she finished what she had started. Shot 22. Fighter emerging from concealment near the rally point. Down. Shot 23. Militia squad leader attempting to coordinate a response. Down. The SEALs were halfway to the rally point now. Cross was struggling under Hayes's weight, but refusing to slow down. Vance had taken a round through his left calf, but was still moving, still fighting, leaving a trail of blood that marked their passage through the snow. Elena descended from the ridge. It was suicide by any conventional measure. A sniper leaving elevated cover to engage at close range. Wounded and outnumbered, moving toward danger instead of away from it. But conventional measures had stopped applying hours ago when she made the decision to answer a distress call that was not meant for her. She hit the valley floor running, rifle up, eyes tracking movement. A fighter emerged from behind a burnt-out vehicle. She shot him without breaking stride. Another appeared in a doorway. He died before he could raise his weapon. Shot 24. Shot 25. The command post loomed ahead. Razan's position. She could see figures moving behind windows, could see the man himself standing in the doorway with a radio pressed to his ear. Their eyes met across 200 meters of killing ground. Razan smiled. The expression made no sense. His forces were shattered. His counter-sniper was wounded. His trap had failed. He should have been desperate, should have been running. Instead, he looked like a man who had just won a game no one else knew they were playing. He raised the radio to his lips and spoke a single word she could not hear, but understood nonetheless. Now. Behind her, Cross screamed. 3 fighters had emerged from a concealed position near the rally point, cutting off the SEAL's escape route. Thatcher and Vance were engaging, but Cross had been caught in the open, Hayes's unconscious body pinning him in place. One of the fighters had a pistol pressed across his temple. Everyone stopped. Razan's voice echoed across the valley, amplified by the same loudspeaker he had used earlier. But now there was triumph in his tone, satisfaction at a plan that had finally reached its conclusion. "Drop your weapons or the young one dies." Elena froze. Through her scope, she could see the fighter holding Cross, could see the angle of the pistol, could see the fear in Cross's eyes as he knelt in the dust with his fallen friend beside him. The shot was possible. Difficult, but possible. 8 inches of visible target at 170 meters. A headshot complicated by the hostage's proximity and her own wounded arm. If she missed, Cross died. If she did nothing, they all died. Razan walked toward her, his smile widening. The ghost becomes flesh. I have waited so long for this moment. Do you know how many nights I dreamed of watching you die? How many prayers I offered for this exact opportunity? Elena kept her rifle raised, her scope fixed on the fighter holding Cross. Her finger rested on the trigger, steady despite the blood loss and exhaustion. "Let them go," she said. "This is between us. It has always been between us." "Yes," Razan agreed. "It has. But you killed my brother, Ghost. My little brother who never held a weapon in his life. You don't get to dictate terms." The distant sound of engines reached her ears. Reinforcements minutes away now, maybe less. Her father coming to finish what Victor Razan had started without knowing the target was his own daughter. Cross's voice cut through the standoff, cracked with fear but defiant. "Wraith, take the shot. Don't let them win. Take the shot." Elena looked at the young SEAL, at the life balanced on the edge of her decision. She thought about her father's voice, whispering across the years. "Sometimes, little wolf, the right choice looks like surrender." She lowered her rifle. Razan's smile flickered with surprise. He had expected resistance, negotiation, perhaps a desperate attempt to fight through impossible odds. He had not expected capitulation. "Wise choice," he said, gesturing for his remaining fighters to advance. "Perhaps you are not as foolish as I believed." She let the rifle fall to the dust at her feet and raised her hands. Her left arm trembled with the effort, blood still seeping from the wound. But her eyes never left the fighter holding Cross. "I have a question," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "Before this ends, I need to know something." Razan tilted his head, curious despite himself. "Ask." "Your brother Mikhail, the teacher, the father of 3, did he ever tell you about his time in Virginia? About the FBI training program at Quantico in 1998? The question landed like a stone in still water. Razan's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping in around the edges of his triumph. "What are you talking about?" "Counter-terrorism training," Elena said, taking a step forward, hands still raised. 3 months, county sheriffs learning tactical procedures, intelligence gathering, how to identify and infiltrate domestic extremist organizations. Another step, She was 20 feet from the fighter holding cross now, close enough to smell his fear. My father was an instructor consultant for that program. Former Soviet Special Forces, defected in '89. Dmitry Volkov. He taught your brother. Raisin's hand moved toward his sidearm. That's impossible. Mikhail never mentioned. The records were classified, Elena interrupted, taking another step. But I found them. After the strike, after I realized what I'd done. Your brother and my father knew each other. Mikhail was trying to save you from yourself, trying to stop you before you crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. She was 15 feet from the fighter now, close enough to see his eyes flick toward Razin for guidance, close enough to see his grip on the pistol loosen by a fraction of an inch as confusion disrupted his focus. And the man coming in that convoy right now, the one you hired to hunt the ghost, that's my father, Dmitry Volkov, coming to kill his daughter without knowing it's me. Razin's face went pale. You're lying. Am I? When he arrives, ask him. Ask him if he had a daughter. Ask him if he faked his death 8 years ago and left her to grieve. Ask him if he taught a little girl to shoot on a ranch in Montana. She took another step, 12 feet now. The past connects us in ways we never understood, Elena said softly. Your brother, my father, both good men trying to make right choices in a world that punishes goodness. And now here we are, about to repeat their mistakes. Razin opened his mouth to respond. Elena moved. Her right hand came down on the fighter's wrist like a falling hammer, redirecting the pistol away from Cross's head as her body twisted into his. The gun discharged into empty air, the report echoing across the valley. Her elbow connected with his throat, collapsing the windpipe before he could scream. She caught the pistol as he fell and put 2 rounds into the fighter nearest to Vance. Thatcher and Vance reacted instantly, their training taking over. Vance dropped the 3rd fighter with a burst to the chest, while Thatcher covered the remaining hostiles near the command post. Cross scrambled to his feet, hauling Hayes's unconscious form over his shoulders with strength born of pure adrenaline. Elena rolled behind cover as Alexei's shot, fired from his wounded position on the eastern ridge, missed her by inches. She came up with the captured pistol trained on Razin's position. Go! She shouted to the SEALs. Rally point, now! I'll cover you! Cross began moving, struggling under Hayes's weight, but refusing to slow down. Thatcher grabbed Vance's arm and pulled him forward, the senior chief's injured leg dragging, but still functional. They disappeared into the tree line that marked the beginning of the rally point corridor. Elena provided covering fire, the pistol barking in her hand as she suppressed the remaining militia fighters. 3 more fell. The rest scattered, no longer willing to advance into the teeth of a woman who had just killed 3 men in 4 seconds. Razin had retreated to the command post doorway, his weapon drawn but held low. He stared at her across the empty ground between them, and something in his expression had changed. The triumph was gone, replaced by exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. You fight like your father, he said quietly, almost to himself. Dmitry taught you well. Elena kept the pistol trained on him, but did not fire. Your brother was trying to save you. His death was my fault, yes, but what you do next is your choice. You can keep killing, keep hunting, keep adding bodies to the count, or you can let it end here. Behind her, the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Her father, minutes away. A reunion 8 years in the making. Razin lowered his weapon slowly. He would have wanted me to walk away, Mikhail. He always said violence only creates more violence. Then walk away, Elena said. Honor his memory by being the man he believed you could be. For a long moment, Razin simply stood there. Then he nodded once and disappeared into the command post. Elena heard the sound of a vehicle starting, pulling away from the far side of the building. She turned and ran toward the rally point, each step sending lightning through her wounded arm. Behind her, the valley erupted with the sound of arriving reinforcements. Shouts in Russian, gunfire as they discovered their scattered forces. But Elena was already gone, vanishing into the trees where four Americans waited. Vance stood at the edge of the tree line, his rifle raised, covering her approach. When she reached him, he lowered the weapon and studied her face. Blood on her cheek from the rock fragments. More blood soaking her entire left arm. Exhaustion carved into every line of her expression. "You crazy, magnificent bastard," he said quietly. "You actually did it." "Not yet," Elena replied. "Still have to get you home." She keyed her radio to Walsh's frequency. "Cardinal, I need those extraction coordinates now." "Sending," Walsh responded immediately. "Coordinates locked. Bird is 3 minutes out. Can you make it?" Elena looked at the four SEALs. Hayes unconscious but breathing. Cross exhausted but standing. Vance wounded but unbowed. Thatcher checking ammunition with the automatic efficiency of a leader who never stopped being responsible for his men. "Yes," she said, "we can make it." They moved through the forest in tactical formation, Elena and Vance providing security while Thatcher helped cross with Hayes's weight. The rally point was 200 meters north, 200 meters that felt like 200 miles with reinforcements hunting behind them. But they made it. The helicopter descended through dawn light, rotors whipping the trees into frenzy. The crew chief beckoned frantically from the open door. Thatcher and Cross loaded Hayes first, then climbed aboard themselves. Vance paused at the door and turned back to Elena. "You're coming with us," he said. It was not a question. "I have..." "Bullshit." Vance grabbed her good arm. "You're bleeding out and you can barely stand. You're coming with us and that's an order." Elena looked at him, at the gray-bearded senior chief who had gone from skepticism to belief over the course of one impossible night. "What's your real name?" he asked quietly. "Wraith is what we called you. But who are you really?" "Elena." "Elena." He tested the name. "Russian?" "My father was, before he defected, before he became the man who taught me everything." Vance held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded and pulled her toward the helicopter. "Come back alive, Elena. That's an order from a senior chief. You don't disobey those." She let him pull her inside. The helicopter lifted off as gunfire erupted from the tree line. Militia fighters emerging too late, their shots falling short as the aircraft climbed toward safety. Elena collapsed against the metal floor. Through the open door, she watched the valley shrink into insignificance. 32 fighters dead by her hand. One counter-sniper wounded. One militia commander disappeared into the wilderness. And 4 men alive who should have died. The crew medic appeared above her, speaking in urgent tones that seemed to come from very far away. She woke once during the flight, brief, disoriented. The medic was saying something about blood pressure stabilizing. Through the open door, she saw another helicopter pacing them. Close formation, unusual for medical evac. Walsh's voice crackled in the headset someone had placed over her ears. "Elena, stay calm. We have a situation." She tried to sit up. Vance's hand pressed her shoulder down. "Easy, Guardian. You're not going anywhere." "What situation?" Her voice sounded distant, drugged. "The second bird. It picked up a passenger from the militia convoy, someone who surrendered to FBI at the perimeter. He asked specifically to be brought to you." Elena's blood went cold. "Dmitri." "Yes." The world tilted, not from the helicopter movement, from the weight of 8 years collapsing into this single moment. "He knows," she said. Not a question. He figured it out when he saw the valley. 32 dead. The shot patterns, the way you moved. He said only one person in the world shoots like that. The person he trained. Through the door, she could see the other helicopter. Could see a figure in the passenger bay, gray beard, watching her aircraft with an intensity that crossed the space between them. "Elena," Walsh's voice was gentle. "We're landing in 2 minutes. He's requested permission to speak with you. You don't have to agree." She thought about the last 8 years, about becoming exactly what he had tried to prevent, about saving 4 men with skills he had given her. "Let him come," she said. The helicopters touched down simultaneously on a secure airfield. Medical personnel swarmed her bird, but Elena waved them back. 2 minutes. Dmitry Volkov walked across the tarmac like a man approaching his own execution. When he reached her, still lying on the stretcher, he simply stared. Yelenushka, he finally said. Russian, the name he called her as a child. What have you done? What you taught me to do, Papa. I saved 4 lives. By taking 32. By being sure this time. By not hesitating when people needed help. She tried to sit up, winced. You were coming to kill me. Did you know that? Razin hired you to hunt the ghost. The ghost was me. Dimitri's face crumbled. When I saw the valley, when I understood, I told Razin I was leaving. He said if I walked, he would hunt me too. He knelt beside the stretcher. I told him to try. You walked away from him. I walked away from killing my daughter. Even not knowing it was you, I would not be the weapon that ended your life. His hand reached for hers. I faked my death to save you from becoming me, but you became something better. Elena squeezed his hand. I became a guardian, not a weapon. There's a difference. Is there? When the body count is the same? Yes, because I save more than I kill. Because I only shoot when I'm sure. You taught me that. Vance appeared, giving them space but staying close. Dmitri saw him and understood. These are the men you saved? 4 of them. 4 families that won't get folded flags. Dmitri was silent. Then, I have a ranch. Montana. When you heal, if you want, you could visit. I'd like that, Papa. Medical personnel were getting impatient. Dmitri stood, then stopped. Elena, your mother, she was FSB, intelligence officer. She defected with me because she understood that some orders shouldn't be followed. You didn't just inherit my skills, little wolf. You inherited her conviction. You're both of us. Then he was gone, walking to the FBI agents waiting to debrief him. Elena watched him go, understanding finally clicking into place. A guardian. Elena woke to white ceiling tiles and the antiseptic smell of a military medical facility. Her left arm was properly bandaged, the wound cleaned and sutured. An IV drip fed clear fluid into her right arm. Monitoring equipment beeped steadily. She tried to sit up. Pain radiated from a dozen locations. Bruised ribs, lacerations, muscles pushed past reasonable limits. Easy there, Wraith. Commander Thatcher's voice came from the corner. He sat in a chair too small for his frame. Doctors said you lost enough blood to drop a horse. Elena managed to sit up. Hayes? Stable. Upgraded from critical to serious. Cross hasn't left his bedside except to eat. Vance? Leg wound was clean. Walking with a limp but nothing permanent. Thatcher paused. We owe you our lives. Elena looked at her hands. Clean now, the blood washed away. 32 men. She had killed 32 human beings in 6 hours. You don't owe me anything, Commander. I'm the reason you were in that situation. Thatcher stood and crossed to her bedside. Walsh briefed us, the full story. He pulled the chair closer. You want to know what I think? Not particularly. He told her anyway. I think you made a call based on information you had. I think someone higher up authorized a strike without verification. I think you've been carrying weight for 2 years that was never yours alone. Elena said nothing. The 8 Marines. Afghanistan. You requested reassignment after that, didn't you? I was no longer effective. My judgment was compromised. Your judgment saved 4 American lives last night. Thatcher leaned forward. You know what separates good operators from great ones? Great ones learn from mistakes. You could have followed protocol. 4 men would be dead, but you'd have a clean conscience. I have plenty of blood on my hands, Commander. Yeah, you do, but it's the right blood. Men trying to kill Americans. You didn't shoot any sheriffs last night, Elena. You shot exactly who needed to be shot. Before she could respond, the door opened. Senior Chief Vance limped in, leaning on a cane. Behind him came Brennan Cross, standing straighter, moving with new confidence. "Well, look who decided to rejoin the living," Vance said. "Doctors said 12 hours. You're 6 hours early. Overachiever." Cross approached the bed. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you. For Hayes, for all of us. You saved our lives." Elena looked at the young SEAL, saw the hero worship in his eyes. "I'm not a hero, Cross. I'm just someone who heard a call and answered it." "That's exactly what a hero is, ma'am," Vance snorted. "Kid's got a point. You ran 8 miles, climbed a mountain, and engaged 60 fighters while wounded. That's not normal." Thatcher pulled something from his pocket, an envelope, worn at the edges. "This came through Walsh's channel. It's for you." Elena took it and opened it. Inside was a photograph. 4 men on hospital steps, arms around each other, grinning despite bandages. Thatcher, Vance, Hayes, Cross, alive. She turned it over, written in block letters. "We remember. Thank you, Guardian." Guardian. Not Wraith, not Ghost. Guardian. Something shifted in Elena's chest. A weight she had carried since Afghanistan lifted slightly. Not gone, never gone, but perhaps shared. "Walsh said you'd want this too." Thatcher handed her a phone. "Your handler is standing by." Elena pressed it to her ear. Walsh's voice came through. "Elena, good to hear your voice. How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot and fell off a mountain." A pause. Then Walsh spoke quietly. "The agency is pleased. 4 servicemen extracted safely. Rosin's compound compromised. No international incident. As far as official records go, the SEALs extracted themselves. You were never there." "I understand. But unofficially, there are people who know." "The director wanted me to convey his thanks." Elena said nothing. She had not done this for thanks. "There's something else," Walsh continued. "The journal, your father's journal." Her grip tightened. "You said the agency had it." "We do. I've been authorized to tell you it's scheduled for declassification review. Parts may remain sealed, but portions will be released. Families of operatives your father trained, historians, people who deserve truth." "How long?" 5 years, maybe 10, but it will happen. Your father's story won't stay buried forever. 5 years, 10 years, but not forever. It was something. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Elena, for reminding us what it looks like when someone decides doing what's right is more important than following orders. She ended the call and handed the phone back. The 3 SEALs were watching her. "What happens now?" Cross asked. "Do you just go back? Pretend none of this happened?" Elena thought about the refugee compound, the concrete walls and calendar, the role she had played for 4 months. "That's exactly what happens. I go back, I pretend, and I wait for the next call." Vance shook his head. "That's a hard way to live. Being invisible, never getting credit. It's the only way I know, Senior Chief. My father taught me that gifts come with responsibilities. I have a gift for finding people in the dark and bringing them home." "Your father," Thatcher said carefully. Walsh mentioned he was Soviet Special Forces, defected in '89. Elena looked at the photograph, saw the futures they would have because she made different choices. "My father taught me 2 things. Everyone must know what they're willing to die for, and what they won't kill for. When you know those 2 things, you know who you are." "And who are you?" Cross asked quietly. Elena met his eyes. "Let him have his stories. Let him believe in guardians and ghosts. I'm someone who won't kill without being sure anymore. And I'm someone who will die to save people who can't save themselves." Thatcher stood, and the others followed. "We need to head back, debriefing after action reports. But we wanted to see you first. Wanted to make sure you knew that we remember." They filed toward the door. Vance paused at the threshold. "Elena, if you ever need anything, if you ever need backup, you call us. We'll come. That's a promise." She nodded, knew she would never make that call, but knowing the offer existed was worth more than any medal. The door closed. Elena was alone with thoughts that would not quiet. She thought about Mikhail Raisin, about his children, about Victor who had channeled grief into rage and then walked away. She thought about Alexei Korsakov, probably recovering somewhere, a professional who would hunt other people on other mountains. Most of all, she thought about her father, the man who walked away from Soviet special forces because he understood some orders should not be followed. The man who spent years teaching his daughter to survive. The man who died, or pretended to die, believing his skills would die with him. A guardian, not a weapon, a shield that stood between the helpless and the void. Elena closed her eyes and let sleep take her. When she woke, she would begin returning to her cover identity. But for now, she could rest. 3 weeks later, a woman with a healing scar returned to the refugee compound carrying medical supplies. The guards waved her through. She smiled and exchanged pleasantries about the weather, played her role with practiced ease. The compound looked exactly as she had left it. Whitewashed walls, dusty courtyard, the garden where refugees grew vegetables. Elena parked and began unloading, fell back into the rhythm of her cover. Aid worker, helper, invisible. A small figure appeared, 7 years old, dark hair in a ponytail. Amira, Syrian refugee, orphaned, living in the compound. "You came back," Amira said. "They said you went away. They said maybe you wouldn't come back." Elena knelt to meet the girl's eyes, saw herself at that age, on a Montana ranch. "I had something important to do, but I always planned to come back." Amira studied her face. "You look different, tired." "I am tired, but I'm also glad to be here." The girl took Elena's hand and led her toward the garden. The tomato plants had grown, vines climbing stakes, fruit ripening. Amira pointed to the largest with pride. "I took care of them. This one is almost ready. I saved it for you." Elena felt something crack in her chest, something frozen since Afghanistan. "Thank you, Amira. That's very kind." They sat together while the afternoon sun painted the mountains gold. Amira talked about the other children, about lessons, about dreams of a future. Elena listened and realized this was why she did what she did. Not for recognition, not to balance scales, but for moments like this. A child safe in a garden, talking about tomorrow as if tomorrow was guaranteed. That evening, she sat on the roof and watched the sunset. Her satellite phone buzzed. Walsh confirming mission closure. Victor Razin had surrendered to FBI at the Canadian border 3 days after the operation. His lawyer issued a statement. Razin would cooperate fully with investigations into his brother's death and the corruption that had led to it. He was trading information for a lighter sentence. The cycle of revenge had ended, not with more death, but with the choice to walk away. The SEALs were home. Hayes, upgraded to stable, transferred near his family. Cross visited daily, telling embellished versions of their rescue. Vance, back at his team house, cleared for light duty. Thatcher had written an after-action report mentioning no mysterious operatives, just 4 professionals who extracted themselves. The official story. Elena existed nowhere in it, a ghost in truth, present only in memories of those she had saved. Her phone buzzed again, a number she did not recognize. She opened it and found the same photograph Thatcher had shown her, annotated with arrows. "Alive because of you." Beneath, "We remember, we'll always remember." Elena saved the image to a folder she would never show anyone and deleted the message. Then she sat in gathering darkness and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Not quite peace, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of peace. The understanding that some wounds could heal if given time. That some mathematics, no matter how impossible, could eventually balance. The stars emerged one by one, the same stars her father had taught her to navigate by. She thought about his journal, scheduled for declassification, stories about men he had trained, and choices he had made. Someday she would retrieve it, but not today. Today she was just a woman watching the sky, listening to children playing below, remembering that the world contained more than violence and loss. Tomorrow she would return to her cover work, hand out water bottles and supplies, smile at checkpoint guards, and play the role of someone harmless. And if another call came in the night, she would answer it, because that was who she was. Not a ghost, not a weapon, a guardian, someone who stood between the helpless and the void, someone who had learned, finally and at great cost, the difference between following orders and doing what was right. Elena Volkov closed her eyes and breathed in the cool night air. Somewhere far away, Brennan Cross was telling her story. Somewhere closer, Amira was sleeping peacefully. The world kept turning, the stars kept shining, and in the silence between heartbeats, a guardian found rest. 6 months later, Elena stood at the gate of a small ranch in the Bitterroot Valley. The sign was weathered, Volkov Ranch, established 1989. Behind the gate, a modest house sat among lodgepole pine, smoke rising from the chimney. She had driven 2 days to reach this place, had not called ahead. Because some reunions required surprise, to bypass defenses built against conversations avoided too long. A man emerged from the barn, 60 years old, gray beard, moving with careful deliberation. He saw her and froze. Dmitry Volkov stared at his daughter across 30 meters, and she saw the moment he recognized her. Shock, joy, fear cycling through his expression. Yelenushka? His voice carried across the distance. Little wolf. Elena opened the gate and walked toward him, each step measured, giving him time to process, giving herself time to prepare. Hello, Papa. They stood facing each other, father and daughter, teacher and student, two people who had spent years pretending the other was dead or lost. I don't understand, Dmitry said. The agency said you were aid worker, safe job. They said what you needed to hear, Elena interrupted gently, so you wouldn't compromise my cover. Understanding dawned. You've been operational all these years. You joined after I faked my death. 1 week after your funeral, I walked into the recruitment office and told them I wanted to serve. Dmitry's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly older. I faked my death to save you from this life, and you chose it anyway. You taught me these skills because the world has wolves. Did you think I'd ignore that lesson? I hoped, he said quietly, I hoped you would never need them. Elena pulled the photograph from her pocket. The 4 seals. Alive. 3 weeks ago, I heard a distress call. 4 Americans trapped. 60 militia fighters. No backup. I went anyway. 8 miles through hostile territory, climbed a mountain in the dark, engaged the entire force solo. She handed him the photograph, watched him study faces he had never met. They're alive because of the skills you taught me, because you spent years preparing me for a life you hoped I would never live. Dmitry's hands trembled. How many did you kill? 32. He closed his eyes. Yelenushka, that's not a gift. That's a curse. It's both. Elena took the photograph back. I've made mistakes, Papa. 2 years ago, intelligence I provided led to a drone strike. A sheriff died. Good man trying to stop his brother's militia. His brother spent 2 years hunting me for revenge. The Idaho operation, Dmitry said. Victor Razin's militia. Yes, he used the SEALs as bait. The whole thing was a trap to draw me out. And you went anyway, knowing it was trap. Because 4 men were dying, and I was the only one close enough. Because I made mistakes before, and people died because I waited too long. I won't make that mistake again. They stood in silence. Then Dmitry reached out and pulled her into an embrace that held 8 years of separation, and love that had survived despite everything. I'm sorry, he whispered. Sorry I left you. Sorry I made you think I was dead. I know, Papa, and I'm sorry I became what you tried to prevent. but I'm not sorry about who I am. I'm a guardian. I save people who can't save themselves. They separated. Dmitri wiped his eyes. Come, we should talk properly. I have coffee. The inside was exactly as Elena remembered. Simple furniture, books lining walls, photographs from a life lived in multiple countries under multiple names. The rifle rack above the fireplace still held weapons her father had carried out of the Soviet Union. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee too strong and silence too heavy. Tell me about the 8 years, Elena said finally. Dmitri sighed. I went back to Russia, took contracts as military advisor, trained counterterrorism units. When Victor Razin hired me for Idaho, I didn't know it was a trap for CIA operative. Didn't know that operative was you. You were coming to kill me without knowing. Yes, when I arrived and saw the valley, saw what you had done, 32 fighters dead, 4 Americans extracted, I knew immediately it was you. No one else shoots like that. Elena remembered Walsh telling her Dmitri was in the convoy. I left before you arrived, extracted with the SEALs. I know. I spent 3 days searching, finally accepted you were gone. He looked at her. Why did you come now? Because I needed to ask you a question I couldn't ask when I was younger. Ask. Do you regret it? Training me? Making me into someone who can kill 32 people in 6 hours? Dmitri was quiet for a long time. His coffee grew cold while he stared at photographs on the wall. Pictures of Elena as a child, learning to shoot, learning to track. I regret that the world needed those skills, he said finally. I regret that I couldn't protect you from becoming what I was. But I don't regret teaching you. Because you're right, you're a guardian. You save more than you kill. That's the difference between us, little wolf. I killed because I was ordered to. You kill because someone needs saving. That makes all the difference. Elena felt something settle in her chest. A question carried for years, finally answered. The journal, she said. The agency has it. They're reviewing for declassification. Parts may be released in 5 or 10 years. Dmitri nodded slowly. Good. Some of those stories should be told. People deserve to know what happened, the choices we made. What will you do now? Stay here, buy horses, maybe teach again, but different things. Survival skills for hikers, marksmanship for hunters, clean things, things that don't end with bodies and regret. Elena smiled. That sounds good, Papa. They talked through afternoon into evening, shared stories of 8 years apart. He told her about Eastern Europe operations, about men he had trained. She told him about Afghanistan and 8 Marines and the weight of wrong shots. As sun set, painting mountains gold, they sat on the porch where he had taught her so many years ago. Can I visit again? Elena asked quietly. Little wolf, nothing would make me happier. This is your home, always has been, always will be. She stood to leave, had a long drive back to Idaho, to the compound, to the cover identity that waited. But she paused at the steps and looked back. Papa, thank you for everything, for teaching me, for trusting me to use your gift the right way, for being the kind of man who walked away from orders he couldn't follow. Dmitri stood and walked to the porch edge. Promise me something. What? No more wrong shots. Be sure, Yelenushka. Always be sure. I promise. She walked to her truck and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as her father stood on the porch until she disappeared. Some reunions were complete in a single afternoon. Others took years. This was the beginning of healing. Elena drove through the night with the window down, breathing pine-scented air, listening to sounds of a world that contained both beauty and violence. Her phone sat silent. No calls from Walsh, no distress signals, no desperate voices, just silence, just peace. Just the road unwinding and the stars above providing navigation for someone who had learned to find her way through any darkness. She thought about Thatcher and Vance and Cross, thought about Hayes recovering, his daughter still having a father because someone decided doing what was right mattered more than following orders. She thought about Victor Raisin, somewhere in the mountains, carrying grief toward an uncertain future. About Alexei Korsakov, probably healed now, hunting other people on other mountains. About cycles that continued unless someone decided to break them. Most of all, she thought about her father, sitting on a porch in Montana, cleaning rifles that would never again be used for their design purposes. A man who had walked away from everything because he understood some orders should never be followed. A teacher who created a guardian without meaning to, but accepting it because acceptance was all that remained once choices were made. Her phone buzzed. Elena glanced at it. A number she did not recognize and a message only 3 words long. "Thank you, guardian." She did not know which of the 4 seals had sent it. Did not need to know. The message was enough. The knowledge that somewhere in America, 4 men remembered what happened in an Idaho valley while the rest of the world slept. Elena deleted the message and continued driving. Tomorrow she would return to the compound, would smile at guards and distribute supplies and play the role she had perfected. Would wait for the next call that might come or might not. But tonight she was just Elena, just a daughter who had visited her father. Just a woman driving through darkness toward a future uncertain, but no longer quite so heavy with regret. The road stretched ahead into darkness. Elena, and somewhere in the space between heartbeats, a guardian found the peace that comes from knowing that when the next call came, and it would come, it always came, she would answer it. Because some promises were worth keeping, no matter the cost. Because some people were worth saving, even when the odds said it was impossible. Because her father had taught her to be sure, and she was finally, irrevocably sure about who she was and what she would do with the gift he had given her. The world needed guardians. And Elena Volkov had decided, 8 miles and 32 bodies in one impossible night ago, that she would be one. Not for recognition, not for gratitude, but because when voices cried out in darkness, someone had to answer. And she was someone who answered. Always.